Welcome to this episode of Zen Money Monday. I'm going to wait for just a second to make sure that we are officially live. We are. Welcome to this episode of Zen Money Monday. I'm Liz Lajoie. I'm so excited for today's guest. My friend, publisher, mentor, taught me a lot about working on an online business and growing one, the incredible Lauria. Thank you so much for being here today.
Oh my God, I got my background ready just for you.
And a few other people in a brand new space.
That's true, but everything's brand new, so it's nice to see. And it's nice to see your books in the background. I always like seeing our authors with not one, but two books.
Two books. I know. Not as many as at the Author Castle, but we still have a couple back behind us. Right. So for those of you who don't know Angela has built a really incredible business. We're at 8 figures and counting after 5 years since you launched originally. Is that true?
Yeah, I officially started in February of 2013, but I didn't actually make any money until September of 2013. So we'll call it 5 years.
Sure.
6 now.
Although that in and of itself is pretty impressive because many people actually go quite a bit longer before they're quote unquote officially making money as well. So you, I feel, have had a significant mission and you have spent a lot of time and energy and effort just focusing on business growth, which is not easy to do.
Yeah, I didn't have a choice. I was a single mom. I still am a single mom, but I was a single mom with a super little kid. I had all of the expenses from when I was married. So I ended up with the house. I ended up with, the expensive car payment instead of the car that didn't have a payment. I ended up with the more expensive cell phone plan. I had all the bills. And I remember when I was deciding to start my business, I had a good job. So I was doing books for a technology company and I was making with bonuses and everything about $200,000 a year.
And when you say doing books, let's just be clear, your version of doing books is different than my version of doing books. Right.
What?
What your role at the technology company was?
So I would interview experts and I would ghostwrite. So I was a ghostwriter, but it's the exact same process I teach my clients. And I would use books to generate leads. So my job was to generate 1,900 leads a month for a software backup company, different sorts of Microsoft server backup, and then 1,900 leads a month that went to an inside sales team. And I managed the inside sales team. They did sales calls and converted the people who took the calls into clients that were worth about $5,000. So it's almost exactly what I do now. I was just doing it selling software instead of services by people who are changing the world with their messages.
I know. It's incredible how sometimes our, quote unquote corporate world can be such an interesting translation into entrepreneurship. You took what was, really clear and obviously working and translated into a very different audience.
Different audience, but the exact same process. And I liked my job. So I know a lot of people quit because they don't like their job.
Mm-hmm.
I actually loved my job. I loved my job. I think that Windows Server backup is good. It wasn't like I was making chemicals or plastics or polluting the ocean or something. Let's back up our Windows Server. Sure. So, But it wasn't what I was passionate about. And I really wanted to help life coaches and other healers and magic makers get their message out. But as a single mom, it felt really irresponsible. And I remember saying, my coach at the time was a woman named Brooke Castillo. And I remember saying to Brooke, it's irresponsible for me to leave a good paying corporate job as a single mom to take a risk of starting a business.
So what was the catalyst then?
I wanted to.
Which I think is true for many of us. It's there's this voice back here behind you saying there's something else out there.
Yeah. I actually was working with Brooke on weight loss. And one of her theories was if you're not fully expressed, the degree to which you're not fully expressed is the degree to which you will be overweight.
Mm.
And so she was asking me basically, what would it take for you to be fully expressed? And my answer was to work with people like Liz Lajoie on books that are going to change the way people feel about money. But like that sounded dumb to me. I was like, why can't I just be happy doing the Windows Server backup books?
I love my job. What's the big deal?
I love my job. What's the big deal? She's like, if you're not fully expressed, you won't be able to lose the weight permanently. I'm like, well, that's a pain in the neck.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to be fully expressed then, except I did.
Mm-hmm.
I remember writing to her. I've never really told anyone this because it's super embarrassing. But I remember writing to her once and saying, she's like, but what do you want? What do you want? What do you want? And I never knew how to answer that. And I was like, I just want to be famous. Okay. And it felt like I literally said, like, I don't know. It was like, I wanted
to stab children in the dark.
I want to kill children. Yeah, it just felt like illegal. I was like, what if people find out I want to be famous?
Mm-hmm.
It was the worst thing I could think of in the world. I was so embarrassed. I had so much shame about my ambition.
Mm.
It felt totally unlovable. Like wanting a job, wanting a good job, wanting to be successful at my job. That was all cool. But like wanting to be a millionaire, what the fuck is that? Or wanting to be a business owner and only work on books about like spirituality and like not things that are real, like Windows Server backup.
Mm-hmm.
Felt like indulgent and just terrible. And until I came to terms with that, like I wasn't ever going to really be happy. But I really liked the story. It's irresponsible. My family got behind the story. It's irresponsible.
Of course.
Like I could get anyone to really agree with me. It's irresponsible to start a business.
But you come from entrepreneurship in your family background, right?
Which was irresponsible. My dad had a job at MITRE, which is like a big corporation. And he put our whole family at risk to start his business. It was irresponsible.
Mm. And that was the ongoing story, even though he proved that story not to be true.
Right. No, he didn't.
Oh.
My dad did great. He had $5 million in revenue. He had 16 employees. He had a 22,000 square foot facility. But the feeling every day in my family was this entrepreneur shit is risky. It's too bad your dad didn't just keep a regular job.
Mm.
Because it was always scary. He'd be like, hey, we're going to invest in this thing. I'm going to do this project. We have a TV show coming up. What if the TV show fails? Like he was on Merv Griffin, but then like the power went out and his interview was cut off. Like there was all this like excitement, disappointment, this roller coaster ride. Like it's not a good way to raise a family. So even though my dad's in the Hot Rod Hall of Fame, has done many like very famous cars that are in hot rodding, he's one of just like the pillars of that community. It was never celebrated really. It was always like, too bad he went the risky way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I have a lot of stories I had to change in my own head before I could be successful. And I did all that work before I started my business. Then when I started in February and it didn't make money, I was like, but I just did 7 years of work. What do you mean nobody's buying my shit?
Because you expected it to happen instantaneously.
Totally thought it would be easy. So I started my own spiritual work in April of 2007.
Okay.
I started my business in 2013. I was like, at this point, I should have it figured out. Like, just send them money. Let me give you my address. The checks can show up at my door. I've watched The Secret.
Yeah, I'll do the work. I'm here. I'm ready.
Right. I'm like, I'm ready for the receiving part. Please, universe, send me my money. Then I had no job. I had all these bills. I had $50,000 in debt from the coaches that I'd hired and to help me be ready.
Mm-hmm.
And then it didn't work.
What was the transition in those first couple of years between the I'm here, I'm ready, and getting to a point of, okay, actually I've built something that has legs and I can see kind of what the next steps are from a business standpoint, because you move very quickly. And part of what I've appreciated in writing with you and being able to experience kind of how you manage is that there's always something new on the horizon, which I think is, the quintessential key to a successful entrepreneur who can build an 8-figure business in 5 years. That's a pretty big deal. But how do you stay on top of kind of moving from nothing to, starting to get traction? Was it very cognizant? Were you conscious about where you wanted to go, or do you feel like you were just riding the roller coaster?
Well, I thought there was an end. So my salary was about $200,000. So I thought I had to replace my salary. And then once I did that, I would be done. Like maybe I could, like my salary is 200,000. Like maybe I could increase that every year, let's say by 10%. So 200, 220, 260, like let's just keep increasing by, I think I was probably maybe thinking 3 to 5%, but let's be crazy and call it 10%.
Sure.
Once I replaced my salary. But mission number one, it was all I could think about morning, noon, and night. I didn't care what it took. I had to replace my salary. In 2013, I had to make $200,000 because who the hell else was going to pay my mortgage?
Right.
Like I had a kid, like there was no other option. And so when I didn't make any money between like February, we opened the doors February 8th. I actually started in January, but my website went up on February 7th. But when I didn't make any money until August and I was out, credit cards were maxed, like I was out. I still in my head had to make $200,000 in that first year.
Right.
Like, because I had to replace my salary. Even though my monthly expenses were building, I was like, I'm just going to get this big check. And launches, there's a lot of people have this launch strategy. So I'm like, I need to do a $250,000 launch. Then I'll pay off all my bills from the year. And it was just like, yeah, it was just like a non-negotiable, which I think is one of my first lessons, I think, was having these non-negotiable numbers. So the way I explain this to people is like, if let's just say my mortgage at the time was $3,000. It was like $2,980. And there wasn't a version in my head where I wasn't going to pay my mortgage. So every month I paid that bill, even if I was taking cash out against my credit card. Like
right.
There just wasn't an option in my head that I wasn't going to pay my mortgage. So now I have a building in Georgetown, which is a 17,000 square foot building. The rent is $50,000 a month. And then I have a castle in McLean where we do like our parties, and the rent on that is $35,000 a month. And that $85,000 feels exactly like my $3,000 did.
Which is fascinating, right? Because in our heads, we feel like, oh my God, if I'm at a point in business where I'm carrying 85 grand in rent on 2 properties on a monthly basis, I've got to feel really
everything's
luxurious. Everything's fantastic.
Yeah.
It feels exactly the same.
I roll around naked in money every night when I get home.
Right.
Feels exactly the same. It's like one way or another, I gotta pay those bills. So right. Our margin in general, meaning the money that we have left over between what we collect from our clients and then what we spend, our margin, our goal is 31%. So earlier we were operating closer to 50%. We've reduced that to reinvest in our business. But last month we had $175,000 tax bill. We had about $300,000 in construction costs. And my margin last month was 5%. Like you guys understand when that number goes negative, eventually you go out of business. Like that's like, for me, I've never had a month with a 5% margin. And most of you guys, the concept of living paycheck to paycheck is basically having a 0% margin or a 5% margin. Like that's it. You got like very little wiggle room. Well, that's what April felt like. If you're listening to this later, we're recording this in May of 2019. April of 19, it was like paycheck to paycheck land. I haven't had that in a while.
And it felt uncomfortable, I'm guessing.
It felt exactly like when I had a job and every month I got $10,000 after taxes, and I was like $8,000 after taxes in my paycheck, and I had $8,000 worth of expenses. I think I got $8,375, and I had $8,000 in expenses. So if the hot water heater went, if I needed to buy anything, there was very little wiggle room. It still feels exactly the same, even though, let's be super clear, like last month I also did about 1.1 million in revenue.
Yeah.
Right? But it
feels
feels
a very different place.
8,000.
It's fascinating how much that visceral response carries through regardless. But I do think what you were saying before around the whole replacing the income piece is really common for so many of us in that whole, like, I'll just build till X and I want to get back to, or I need to, whatever the conversation is, get to the certain point. And I think that it's an interesting transition, because at a certain point, I think, and you can tell me if this happened to you, I think we get to that, we hit that point, or we get close to hitting that point, and then we go, oh, except now my number is different, but it's really the same.
Yeah, so it turns out $200,000 in salary is different than $200,000 in company revenue.
Right.
That was very sad news for me, because I felt like all I'm doing is talking to people on the phone. So if I get $200,000, then I put it into my bank account and I pay the bills. And I know I have to pay my taxes now, but after taxes, if I need $8,000, I should still end up with about $8,000. But I was ending up with more like $3,000 or $4,000, which was a major problem. I had to pay for things I didn't really think about, or I underestimated. I had to pay for, it was like, I had to pay for a website. I had to pay for hosting. I had to pay for MailChimp. I had to pay for editors. I had to pay for somebody to, I don't know, do something for me. I wanted to do my own class. I took a class on how to create an online course.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to do that in your corporate job, your boss just pays for it.
Right.
Or you don't do it. But I wanted to take this course, so I had to pay for it. But that wasn't part of the $8,000. That was like my rent, my credit card bills, my car payment, my kids' daycare. There was no line that was like pay for courses.
Right.
So
how long?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, so all of a sudden, this $200,000 was nowhere near enough to pay my bills. So I just thought I needed $400,000. I was like, clearly, if I have $400,000,
just double it. That'll be enough.
Yes. That story still continues in my life. I keep trying to just like double it, and then it'll be enough. Then I realized, oh no, you have to always be growing towards something. But the first time I realized, I thought it would be $200,000 and done with these like little increases. Then I was like, oh, I get it. It's $400,000 and then I'm done. And now after I hit 400,000, I will tell you, it did occur to me, oh, you have to keep growing.
Yeah.
Oh,
especially if you want to, grow a business that becomes a place where you can employ other people, which I know is important for you. If you want to be famous, having that kind of platform is useful. Whatever it is, it's very hard to stay stagnant, because when we don't actually stay flatlined, we decline.
Yeah.
And people don't tell you that.
Nobody told me that. That felt like I really thought this was how I figured it out. I was in the gym one day. I only go to the gym if there's a personal trainer that I'm paying ridiculous amounts of money to, because there's no other way I'll go on my own. And I was with this personal trainer. His name was Brian. And I bought a package for him. It was a 3-month package, twice a week for 3 months. And we were it was 16 weeks. And we were at the 3-month mark.
Okay.
And I was in the middle of working out, and I looked at him and I'm like, this is really hard. He's like, yep, that's why we're here. And he's like all perky about it. And I knew as I was asking this question, he was going to be asking me soon if I wanted to buy another 4-month package. And so I'm like, it's been 3 months and it hasn't gotten any easier. And he was like, you're welcome. And there's like, this conversation is going weird. I'm not going to buy from you. I know you're going to ask me to renew. Mm-hmm. I can't renew with you if I'm not seeing any progress. I'm like, I'm paying you to help me make progress. I'm like, I haven't lost any weight. Every time I come, I sweat just as much. Like, I don't think your system is working. And he was just like, so, on this machine here, you used to do half of the weight you're doing now. And on that machine, you used to do 1/3 of the weight you're doing now. And you can hold a plank for a minute now, and you used to not be able to hold it for more than 10 seconds. He's like, every time you come, I make your workouts harder. I'm like, why? Like, I thought we were going to be done with that. Like, I thought it was easy for all the skinny people. And he's like, do your clothes fit better? I'm like, well, yeah, I'm in a size down, but I haven't lost any weight. He's like, do you realize that muscle weighs more than fat? I was like, no. Like, what's happening? I'm like, when am I done with these workouts? And he's like, yeah, people actually keep making it harder forever. Like, the older you get, the more important it is, it'll get harder. I was like, this is a tragedy. And that's how I felt about my business. There was like this day where I realized, oh, we just keep making the workouts harder.
Right.
Now it's $1 million a month. Before it was $10,000 a month. Like, eventually it's going to be super boring, like $1 million, like whatever. We obviously do 10 million a month.
So what is the end game? I'm skipping way ahead, right? Do you envision this, you being addicted to this version of the mental, emotional, whole person workout that is entrepreneurship?
So I think for a lot of people, I learned this from one of my authors, Gina Catalano. There are 4 ways to exit a business. And I think for a lot of people, that way is having your company bought. Mm-hmm. And I have set up my company so that it could be bought. Within 18 months, I'll be completely out of the business. So by the way, if you're watching this and you want to work with me, get in now. My team is amazing. But within 18 months, I will be out of this business. And I've made the branding transition, and I've made the transition in terms of duties. There's like 2 or 3 things I'm still responsible for. But I will be out of this business. There are a couple other ways to get out of your business. So one is like, the way Gina says it, is you die at your desk. I'm not going for that option. The other is you can pass the business on to a child or family or whatever, like an inheritance. And then there's the way that I am aiming for, which is passing my business on to my employees, so it becomes an employee-owned business.
Yeah.
So that's my goal, is to be able to do that. I don't know, let's say before I turn 60, so in the next 15 years or so, I would love to be able to transition my business into being an employee-owned company. My biggest goal right now with this business is having our second CEO, to know that we can go from a founding CEO to an operational CEO, which is totally like a complete game changer. And once we've had 2 CEOs other than me, then I think it'll be time for me to sell my company to my employees.
I think I love that planning. You know, I don't know if you know this, but in my previous life, before I moved into the online world doing what I'm doing, I went through an ownership transition, a successful one for a small engineering firm. And we had an ESOP, which is an employee stock ownership plan. And the ESOP ended up taking over 30% shares of the business, and then the rest was transitioned privately. So there's like a million different ways to do this, but it can be a really great way for anyone who doesn't know about this to maintain culture and to really continue to, you know, build something that can stand on its own legs, but also has engagement from staff. So I'm super excited to hear about that, because there's a lot of challenge to it, but it's also going to be such a great opportunity for you and for the employees and all of that. But it sounds like you have it pretty well mapped out. Do you feel like you've always had that ability to plan and sort of forecast? Or have you just been like drinking from the fire hydrant for the last 5 years?
Well, I have the best job ever, because I get to work with authors like you and Gina Catalano, and who you should have on here. Gina Catalano is amazing.
Yeah, she is.
Pam Pryor. Like, I've learned a lot by reading my clients' books, which is why I wanted this job in the first place. It's why I made this job for me. But no, I didn't know any of this. I had no idea. I thought I was going to make $200,000 working for myself instead of working for a software company.
At what point did you realize, oh, I'm not just feeding myself, this is a real business, and started thinking about kind of team building and needing to pay attention to your financials and sort of operational stuff?
I want to say that was in the $3 to $6 million transition, which would be when I brought Pam Pryor on. Mm-hmm. So getting from 0 to 250 was really me on my own. I had Brooke mindset work, but that was really, I knew how to make $200,000 because I'd done that as an employee. Getting from 250 to 3 million, really 250 to a million, but 250 to 3 million, I worked with a mentor, a guy named Kevin Nations, who's brilliant. And he's really the one who taught me how to get to 3 million And he really teaches, he has a company called Chillionaire. He teaches how to do a lifestyle business and kind of stop at 3 million. I think he's brilliant at getting people from 250 to 3 million. If anybody's at that mark, I highly recommend him.
Which is a wide range, let's be honest, right?
Yeah, but if you're at zero, like if you haven't hit $250,000 or $500,000, you're not
possible.
It seems impossible, but he's not a great person to help you like figure out how to create a quality offer that people will buy. That, by the way, I'm amazing at. Like that's my zone of genius.
Yeah.
But if you already have that quality offer and you want to go without having any employees from 250 to like 3 million, he can teach you how to do it with no employees. But when I hit that $1 million mark, basically Kevin gave me an option, which was have a Chillionaire business where it's just you and a couple freelancers, and mostly you're trading on your knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
Or you got to start thinking about business and culture. This is when Tony Hsieh's book, Delivering Happiness, came out about Zappos. Like, you're going to have to build a business and a culture. And he's like, that's really hard. I'm not sure you want to do it. Why do you want to do it? And I didn't have a good reason. And I said, because I want to be able to sell my company so I can quit. I don't want to do this forever.
Huh.
That actually wasn't even true. I was just looking for a reason.
To keep going?
No, for a reason to stick with books. Because really, what it would have required for me to stay at like the 1 to 3 million range is giving up being able to hold my author's books in my hand, which is totally ego. And he's like, why do you need to do that? Why can't you just teach them and they go do their books on their own? And the answer was, I really want to build a business and a culture, because that's what it's like. Personal satisfaction for me is knowing we have a 98.76% success rate. And
which is amazing.
Pissed about that 1.25% and get a little defensive. I'm like, one of the guys died, just so you know. Like, I'm like, there are some really good reasons that 1.25% didn't succeed. Like, I want 100% success rate. And I feel like with information businesses, you have to be willing to give up control and just say, hey, my client can take the information and do what they want.
Right.
I wasn't willing to do that.
I totally understand. I feel this, it's very hard to, and some people are really good at that. And if that's you and you're building a business that way, great. It's really important to know that about yourself though, because if you create a business that involves you to have to let go of something that's really hard for you to let go of, then that's not ultimately going to work for you. But I totally understand. It would be really hard for me to do the same thing. Yeah.
Like Wealth Factor, there's a guy, Gareth, I think he has a company called Wealth Factory, and they just like teach you shit that I watch. It's brilliant shit that I watch people not implement.
Right.
Whereas when people work with someone like you or like Pam Pryor, or if they want to sell their business, Gina Catalano gets companies ready to sell. Like, you're in the trenches. It's not like you're teaching philosophy. And you teach philosophies in your book. But if I actually hire you, we're going to like do shit together. You're going to look at my numbers. We're going to have conversations. I'm probably going to cry. Like, you're not crying at Wealth Factor. You're reading shit and thinking about it, which is fun.
It's great. But you're right. It leads to, there's a place for that. But I think for many people, entrepreneurship is really hard. So if there's a way to learn that involves somebody helping you actually implement, that's way more success oriented than I'm going to read a book and that's awesome. And I'm super excited until I get distracted by my kids and then it's on my bedside table and I've never actually done anything with that information.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. And that was too important to me. And that's not important to Kevin, I think, in the same way. So he got me to 3 million, but at that 1 million mark, I was like, oh, fuck, I have to build a company. I don't know anything about building a company. But what I thought I would do is I would have tasks like editing or book covers, and then I would assign a person a task, and then I would give them money for completing the task. Doesn't this sound very reasonable?
Seems super reasonable, but we all know that's not actually how management works.
That is too bad.
It is.
But
for linear thinkers like you and me, it is very too bad.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, give you money and you give me the book cover and then we do that again.
Yeah.
No, I had to learn how to actually, and in a trillionaire business, the way Kevin teaches it, you can do that. You can have those few of those transactional relationships, have somebody come in and do catering for an event. And they give you a menu and then you give them money and then they bring the food and then they clean up and leave. But if you want to actually do what I'm doing, which is to really create an asset that lives beyond me, you got to build a culture and a team. And what I've seen with acquisitions is they usually kill the culture, which essentially kills the revenue.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And the whole thing sort of falls apart.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, what you're doing is a super viable option. And it does take that long. For our business, when our transition, we were like the third round of attempted transitional trial. And it doesn't happen instantaneously. It was a 16-year process by the time we were done, and so
Wow.
It takes time.
Yeah. And I know one of the big things, like I just sort of figured this out intuitively and reading books like Rocket Fuel and things like that. I was like, oh, if I'm the CEO, I mess everything up.
Huh.
All we're kind of proving is that like how well I know the business because I'm the creator. But it's sort of like if you're a parent and your kid lives with you for their whole life, like they can live a good life. You haven't really launched your child.
Right. And it's hard to see the full development of them because they can't learn everything they need to know just from you as the founder either.
No, that's exactly it. So it was funny. We had an event here this weekend and I came in on Monday and we did infused water. So there was strawberry infused water, there was cucumber infused water and lemon infused water. And it was like this pretty display. And somehow over the weekend, nobody cleaned it up. The event was on Friday. And so now there were moldy strawberries and like fermented water. And like, it's such a little thing, but if I were there, I know it would have gotten cleaned up.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know who they think is coming to clean it up. Like I wasn't there. So I came in on Monday and I'm like, whose job is it to worry about this? Because if it's mine, there's like a million moldy strawberries in my life to worry about.
And at your stage, right, we can't. I love this conversation because it's when it's your business, you hold all the things for so long, but at a certain point, you can't be the person who worries about the moldy strawberries. You've got way other bigger things on your plate.
Right. And then I wouldn't be worried about how do I eventually sell this company to my employees? Right. Like I wouldn't be worried about how do I get us to $100 million in stable revenue where everybody has jobs, where they have time with their family, where they're able to bring their whole selves to work, where their spirituality and their passions and their personality is celebrated. How do I create that culture if I'm worrying about infused water not getting thrown away, bugs in my building? Like somebody else can worry about the infused water. I'm sure that doesn't have to be me.
How long did it take you to, and maybe it's still a work in process, but how long has it taken you and how have you managed letting go? Because that's a really hard thing for a lot of founders to do as well.
Letting go is super hard. I am really good at it now. I'm so proud of myself. I think it's one of the biggest accomplishments in my life that nobody cares about. Like there's no graduation ceremony.
I'll applaud you for that.
Thank you. So I would say it was my goal for last year, having that transition from Kevin to working with Pam Pryor as my CFO, a CFO who's gone through acquisitions and was able to ask me some of those hard questions about what are you building and how much money are you going to have to build what you want to build, both personally and as a legacy. Like on both fronts. So like one of my goals was to be able to stop working. And so I had to ask questions about like, if I'm going to stop working in 5 years, and that was 5 years, like maybe 2.5, 3 years ago, like if I'm going to be able to stop working, how much income do I need to have? So how much do I need to be putting away? I did those personal things with Pam as well as the business. What are the milestones the business has to hit if you're going to not be involved in the day-to-day, like show up for a party a couple times a year? What are the milestones you have to hit and how much money do we need for that?
Right.
So answering those questions, sort of the byproduct was me stepping out of things piece by piece. So I still have 3 things I'm super intimately involved with, but I have a plan to unravel them over 18 months. But that plan started about 18 months ago. So it was a 3-year plan. And the first thing I stepped out of, this is very funny. You were probably part of this. Were you here when Ray started with me?
For my second book, I think so, yeah.
Okay. So the very first thing I stepped out of was I stopped having anything to do with recording my weekly calls or uploading them to a cloud server. So I did
Which sounds like a really small thing.
Months, tears, months, multiple employees, thought it was impossible, kicked, screamed, cried. I know it sounds so small. It was such a big accomplishment in my life. And I've had to literally identify every single thing I do in the company, which just identifying is hard, because you don't think one of my tasks is to look for moldy strawberries.
No, you just do it.
You just do it. You walk by it and then you see the moldy strawberries and you throw them out. I don't know how I would. It's not on a checklist.
No.
I know that would have been done and I don't know how. It just would have. I would have been like, oh, you should throw that out. So I had to identify every single thing I did, including noticing when the strawberries were getting moldy in the infused water, or that they would get moldy. I had to write down everything and then assign jobs to it, which right now my job is 41 people and I still have 3 more jobs to give up. 41 jobs, what I was doing.
Yeah.
Explains why I was tired. 41 different people with full-time jobs to do what I was doing alone, and everything's not covered yet.
Well, I think that is a really important takeaway for people, actually, is it's impossible to clone ourselves. And I know people who have built big businesses and then been like, I'm actually going to reduce it again to make it a 1-person business because I don't want to deal with the management. And then there's the other version like you, which is I got to figure out how to step out of this. And I have to recognize that there's not a 1-for-1 comparison here. If I'm giving something up, it's probably time-wise and execution-wise and all of that, 1 to 6, or I don't even know what the number is. It depends on
I have heard it's 1 to 7.
Yeah.
That's what I heard it is.
Which is so demoralizing when you're growing your business to be like, I need 7 times me just to get done what I did this morning. I don't understand.
It's crazy.
Do you have insight into why you think that is? Is it because people just aren't in our founder passion?
So I think I have a few answers to this, and I ask this question in every mastermind group I'm in. Why do you think this is? So reason number 1 for me is it's my money.
Mm-hmm.
That 5% margin is mine.
Yeah.
And so I see so other people walk by the water and think maybe somebody will throw out this water, or if not, we'll do it Monday. They don't even think about it or whatever. I see it and I'm like, if it gets left there and something happens and we end up with bugs, then there's going to be a exterminator and I'm going to have to pay for the exterminator, but it could lead to a conversation with the landlord because we're not supposed to do that. I can see the ripple effects lightning fast because the ripple effects are me. The ripple effects are not my event coordinator.
Right.
So I think that's reason number 1. Reason number 2 is because of the role, the unique position of founder, there is so much more in your head than you could ever verbalize in words. So Wittgenstein says that there is about that which that cannot be spoken, there can only be silence. So he talks about how there's so much in communication that we can never, ever express. And I think it's something like 80-20. I can say 20% of what I'm actually thinking. 80% of it, there's no way. Of that 80%, there's another 20% of that people can learn over time. And the rest of it is just I'm creating it. I am in creation, and there's so much that nobody can read my mind because I don't even know what it is. It's just in the moment I would know.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of stuff, my team that's been with me, Robin and Ray and Mila, people who have been with me from the beginning. They're like, oh, this is what Angela will do. Like, it's almost like artificial intelligence now. Like, they know me well enough. But even that, it doesn't cover everything.
And it's taken a lot of time to get to that point.
It's taken so long. And I learned to do this thing of meta teaching. So I used to just say, okay, do a cover. It should say, whatever the difference. And I want it to have a feather. Now I'm like, okay, let me tell you why we're doing this. I want to cover, it's going to say the difference. It should have a feather. But here's the deal. What I'm thinking about is eventually we're going to want to have clients that come visit us. And when they come visit us, I want to be able to give them a quill feather pen, which I didn't even know that, so I couldn't have said it. And also, my grandmother died, and we still have a really close relationship, and the way she communicates with me is through feathers. And in the future, I'm going to tell that story a lot. And when I tell that story, it'll help prospective clients know they want to work with me, because those prospective clients will see a feather and it will tell them they should work. What?
I know, right?
It's impossible.
You can't translate.
So I can say, please make me a cover with a feather on the front, which is what I said. And then later I'm like, oh, Chris Winfield says you can't connect the dots going forward, only looking backwards. Now I'm like, oh, that's why it was so important to me that I had the feather. Mm-hmm. It's used in client gifts. It's used in marketing. It's used in client conversion. It's used in stories. It ties everything together. I knew that, but I didn't consciously know it in a way I could explain to another human. It's what makes me the founder. Mm-hmm. And you have to be willing to give up a lot of that. Like a lot. Now we just have like systems and processes and we use feathers. What was the thing? I'll give you a perfect example. This might be boring, but anyway, we have at the castle, which is where I did all my events at the beginning of my business, we have white marble floors. And so at some point I was in charge of everything. So I was in charge of taping down cords. So I went to the store and bought white tape for my white floors.
Sure.
Later, I hired somebody, a guy named Steve, still works for us, to tape down the cords. It was like a year into my business. I got to hire somebody, 8 months in, got to hire somebody to tape down the cords. He went to the store and he bought black tape. And I was like, you're a fucking moron. Why would you buy black tape? So I sat him down and I'm like, you're a fucking moron. You got to buy white tape. Do you not see the color of my floors? We buy white tape. And then there became an official company decree. This is a white tape company. And it was posted on everything. Angela hates anything but white tape. So now we have a new building and we have wood floors. They're brown.
No more white tape.
Throughout the whole building, there's white tape. Why is there white tape? We're a white tape company. Mm-hmm. We're not a company that has tape that matches the floor color. We're a white tape company. Why? Angela likes white tape. So I walk into the room and we're now, Steve still works here, but he's been promoted several times. Somebody else has the tape, the stuff. Millie tapes the stuff down. I'm like, Millie, why the fuck would you use white tape? Are you a fucking moron? And she's like, I was told very clearly we're a white tape company. And I'm like, life is so hard. But this times a million, you guys, times a million little things where I'm like, nope, it turns out we're not a white tape company. We're actually a company that matches the tape to the color of whatever we're taping, not just floors, because what if we're taping a wall? Mm-hmm. So I think in Silicon Valley, they call this design thinking. And they try and hire people who understand design thinking. I don't know if that works with software design. What I can tell you with managing people is I've had to learn that I'm the problem. People are like, Angela's the business owner, make her happy. She likes white tape.
Right. As opposed to engaging their brain and saying, let me look at this room and make it the best it possibly can be.
Mm-hmm. So all those decisions I was involved with, I have to like unwind myself from. And I found leaving town is the best way to do this. If I'm here, I fuck everything up. Then I yell at people and I call them morons for using white tape when clearly they're doing precisely what they were told to do. Like,
I know.
So
now that you have built this incredible business and you're eyeing sort of exit strategy and all of that entails, I ask this of everybody who's on the show. What is your definition of Zen money? What does that mean to you and how does it fit into your world?
I have a quote. So when I realized I wasn't just trying to get to $400,000, that wasn't going to do the trick, I wrote this goal, and my goal is to build a solid, stable, tremendously cash flowing business with sanity that will get me to $5 million in wealth in 4 years so that I can retire. So solid, stable, tremendously cash flowing. That's what Zen means to me, and sanity.
I love that. Do you feel like now that you're however many years after having written that goal, do you feel like you're on track?
I'm like 2.5 in, and I have 1.5 left. And that was the plan that I created. Like when I was at $1 million, I was like, I want to get to the point where I have 5 million cash in the bank. And then I also have cash flow and a salary. So I've set up my business so that my company licenses the intellectual property for me. So I have a salary for life.
Nice.
And then my heirs have a salary. Like even if I sell the business to the employees, they will forever license the intellectual property for my estate.
Did you have that in your head already, or did someone lead you to that?
Yeah, someone led me to that. I learned that because I went to a mastermind it was a program called Summit at Sea. And I sat down at lunch next to a guy named Matt Mullenweg, who is the CEO of WordPress, the company's Automatic. And I had lunch with the guy who founded WordPress, and that is similar to how he set it up. And I was like, well, that's a great idea. Like,
Fantastic
I didn't know
idea.
It, but I was like, I'm going to do that. He sounds smart.
Well, and I think this is really appropriate for so many people who are listening and everyone that you work with and most people that I work with, right? These are people who we're selling our brains for a living. It's not the same as saying, okay, we built a business that can make widgets that sell for $1 million and that's what it is. It's, so what is the long-term effect and benefit to you, the owner, especially as a founder? I think it's fantastic.
Yeah, and then I worked with Mary Stirk. Mary Stirk did a book with me I was actually the same month. She wrote that book, and I met Matt Mullenweg, and she did a book called Ready to Pull the Retirement Trigger. And I didn't know what any of that meant. And she talked about how much income I needed in order to retire. And one of the things Mary said that changed my life, it's in her book, was all that money does is buys you choices.
I love that.
So I'm like, I want lots of choices. I don't want fewer choices as I get older. I want more choices. Mm-hmm. How many choices do I want? That's why I don't want to sell my company, because I just like the cash flow. I want the cash in the bank, and then I want cash flow. And then and the cash flow is from my intellectual property. And then I want to be able to still be building my legacy and the value in the world and on the planet. So I had to start thinking about all those things so far in advance. Like, we're not there. It doesn't feel like I'm there. I do not feel like I am at any fucking mountaintop. I just don't want anybody to think that's how it feels.
And it probably never will, right? Because that's just what life is. But it is interesting to, I'm glad that we're having this conversation, because I think so many people, very successful, put off this conversation with themselves about what they want the future to look like. And we somehow think that I'm going to sell my business for whatever number I decide I need for the rest of my life. Has nothing to do with market value, has nothing to do with equity that I've built in the business. It's just going to happen. Right. And then they're left holding the bag going, oh shit. And it's really, really tricky. Like, cause you also, there's this give and take piece, especially if you're going to sell your business to employees, in terms of transparency around numbers and all of that kind of stuff. So it takes time.
Right. Totally. It takes time and strategy. It takes, I think, vision in a way I knew I had to have a vision about my product and my customers.
Yeah.
I had that. That was no problem. And I think anybody who's had a job sort of has that, because when you go to a job interview and they say, like, why do you want the job? What would you do here? Why do you think you're a good fit for this job? You kind of have a vision for yourself in the role. So I 100% did that. It felt like every other job I took. Like, I think we can generate thousands of leads and get lots of people to buy your software. And then if we get a real lot of people to buy your software, I'd like a bonus. And then I thought, I'll take that bonus and use it to pay off debt or go on vacation. Like, that vision part wasn't that hard for me. But like the vision about building a company culture, I had no vision there. The vision about retirement, nothing. It looked like I was staring into like moldy fish tank water, you know, like that somebody hasn't cleaned and there's not a catfish. So it's just sort of green.
Mm-hmm.
It seemed like it was for somebody else. I didn't even know what it was.
It'll happen somewhere out here.
That's why I would say one of the reasons my programs include a community element, and one of the reasons why I drag myself to mastermind groups, is because that's, to me, what is Jim Rohn says, you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So to me, what that actually means, operationalized, is you will begin to be able to see through the dirty fish tank just by being around people. And the reason I could see through the dirty fish tank of like vision for my clients and the products and my delivery is I learned that in corporate. But why would I know anything about retirement or wealth building or finances or profit and loss statements? Like I didn't have any vision there. So I just went to places like Archangel is one of the communities I'm a part of. That I mentioned, Kevin Nations and his Chillionaire program. I went and I was with those people. And then the water started to clear up. It's like learning a foreign language by immersion.
Right.
Like instead
start to go, what does ROI really mean and how do I apply it? I don't know until you do, because you've done it.
Until somebody like tells a story. So yeah, then somebody tells a story and you're like, oh, that's why ROI matters. Oh, that's like somebody will just say in passing, like I'm paying for my ad spend with my downsell. Okay,
I don't know what that means. That's gobbledygook.
Right. And then you're like, oh, wait, hold on. At lunch, can you explain the thing about how you pay for your ad spend? Because I don't have enough money for ads.
Right.
And then you like sit down and have lunch with someone, and then you learn what the word downsell means, and you learn what paying for my advertising. And somebody else said to me at a mastermind, my friend Sam Ovens said to me, I just liquidate the ad spend before the credit card bill comes. Liquidate the ad spend. Liquidate the ad spend before the credit card bill comes. I'm like, okay, what could that mean? And then it turned out it was really simple. What he meant was I don't take payment plans. So I pay for advertising on my credit card.
Right.
And then take the leads from those ads and I charge people in full. I then get the money from them. And when the credit card bill comes, I pay it off in full. So I'm not paying any interest. Essentially, my ad spend is free. The person who said I liquidate or I cover my ad spend with my downsell, what they meant to say was I sell enough of lower priced items from people who say no to my big program that if I'm spending $1,000 a month in advertising and I sell $110 books, just by selling my books at $10, all the advertising is free. And any clients that come out of it, like let's say of those 100 people, 2 of them pay me $10,000. That's money I get to make. That was shit I just didn't know until I heard people say big words in meetings. And then I sat with them at lunch and learned what the big words meant.
It's a learning process.
It's a total learning process.
What I love about what you've done, and to wrap this around, because we've taken a lot of your time and I very much appreciate it, is when you're working with clients, you do a lot of business building conversation with them, particularly sort of to get to the $250,000 mark. And there's a lot of conversation kind of about navigating this, sort of teasing back these gobbledygook conversations. So in that, do you have 1 takeaway for people who are maybe at that level or approaching that level? Like, what is the biggest issue and what is the biggest solution from your perspective of people who are in that, getting to $250,000?
Yeah. If you're turning it to $250,000, there's one thing I think you need, and that is stable, steady, repeatable lead flow. And you must learn how to invest in steady, stable, repeatable lead flow. What most people think they're going to do is write a better book, be a smarter human, lose 10 pounds, get a stylist, show up more on Facebook Live, and somehow magically they'll get leads. So I feel like one of my missions in life is to tell people successful companies pay for leads. There's a name for this. It's advertising.
Right.
However much money you want to make, you should be spending 10% of that on advertising in advance. It's very simple. It's a very easy math equation. If you want to make $250,000, you're going to spend $25,000 on advertising in a year. That's the answer. Surprise.
Right. And then we have to figure out
ad spend. We can bootstrap to pay for your ad spend. There's lots of ways we can cover the cost, but we're not going to make money and then have money to spend on advertising. We spend money on advertising, then we make money and we pay off that debt. It's not a salary. It's a business. That's why you got to make more than the amount of money you want to make.
Right.
So $250K to me is minimum wage. I actually have I have a free class. It's a 20-minute class. I think it's maybe 17 minutes. It's very short. If you go to quartermillionbook.com, it'll tell you how to make $250,000. I think that's minimum wage. You can learn it I used to have a thing called 200K in 20 minutes. So now I call it $250,000 book. It's the same thing. You have no excuse for not making $250,000. And by the way, that's not enough. Once you get there, you need to learn more. You need to earn more. But your number one goal, if you are not at $250,000 right now, needs to be steady, repeatable lead flow. I think the best way to do that is with a book. There are 3 things once you have a book that you can do more effectively to get steady, repeatable lead flow. One is you can have more effective ad campaigns. You'll run an ad to your book. One of our authors this year, Sharon Pope, ran an ad to her book. She sold 70,000 copies of her book in a year, and she covered the cost of her ad spend by charging for people to buy the book. I think it was $5. They bought her book, 70,000 times 5. That's her ad budget, people. Do the math.
Right.
And then it will tell you how much money she's making in her business. Add a 0 to the end, and that's how much money she's making. So if you want to run ads to a book, that is what we teach people how to do. You need a book to do that. We set up books that will turn into clients. Number 2, media. The next best way to have steady, predictable lead flow is doing steady, predictable media coverage. You should have an article at least once a week, and then you should be re-promoting that article. So you should even be using ads, but promoting the article every week, get a new one, promote it every week. I recommend Chris Winfield for that, but any sort of PR company is going to be able to help you do that. They're going to love you if you have a book. If you want the media to quote you, having a book is going to make a huge difference. And the third way is speaking. And you don't have to do all 3 of these. You can, but you really just have to pick one. The third way is speaking. I recommend a guy called Majid McGarabon for this. But if you want to do speaking to get a regular flow of leads, you better be speaking every single week. That means you like travel and you like talking. If you like travel and talking, every week you should be able to generate 5 to 10 prospects that you have sales calls with, which will get you 2 to 3 clients a week. So speaking, media, advertising, a book's going to make it easier to book speaking gigs, a book makes it easier to book media, and a book makes it easier to run effective ad campaigns. So $250,000 book teaches you how to get to $250,000 with a book. Anyone who wants to make a difference, to me, has no excuse not to get to that $250,000 mark.
I appreciate you giving all of that because so many people get into business because they do want to make a major difference. And that's a very different business type. And as we've talked about today, in terms of how you're growing your business, than just, I want to make money to drive the bottom line to do A, B, and C, which is, I think, how many of us think about business. And so if we're creating a mission-driven business, we owe it to ourselves and to the people that we're going to be able to help to be willing to put the money in and be willing to understand and learn and grow, which you have shown in your storytelling with us today. So I really appreciate you coming on, Angela. Thank you so much.
Money is literally my favorite topic. And there's one point we didn't get to that I feel like I'd love to end on.
Great.
I love Mother Teresa, and I love telling people think like, I have a mission-driven business. I think we can all agree, so did Mother Teresa. We're all on the same page. Nobody looks at Mother Teresa and they're like, she was really into just like spending money on herself, all those expensive handbags. Like clearly she was in it, whether you like her or not, she was in it to make the world a better place. You might not like whatever the mission she picked, or the Catholic Church, good reasons to like them or not. But like, here's a lady who wanted to make a difference. Well, she generated $100 million. $100 million. She was somebody who was worthy of holding $100 million of the universe's wealth, of God's abundance. So Mother Teresa had an amazing money mindset. And I think a lot of people use spiritual bypassing for their reason to not have an amazing money mindset. They're like, I don't care about money, I just care about people.
Right.
Well, I'm sorry, Mother Teresa proved you cannot do that. That's a shitty, lame, ego-driven excuse. Because if you actually care about making a difference, then you have to learn how to become Zen about money. If you want to make a difference, you have to become a steward for more and more of the universe's money. Because all money is an energetic shift that signals what's important. And if what's important is healing your health, or providing safe housing for the lepers, or ending racism, whatever is important to you, that is going to be signified by the amount of money you are willing to hold space for. So I don't care if you dress in rags and use all your money to feed the lepers. I don't care if you buy Chanel bags. Whatever you want to do with your money is on you, but there is no excuse if you want to make a difference to not becoming someone who can hold space for more and more money. That's why I think your mission is so important and why I believe in you so deeply.
Thank you so much. And I couldn't have said it better myself, so I'm not even going to try. Thank you, everyone, for listening this session, and we will be back with more great guests like Angela in the future. Thanks for stopping by. I really, really appreciate it.
Love you.